Oregon is going to the Final Four.
The following is a Learfield presentation of the Oregon Sports Network.
And Oregon is going to play in the national championship game.
This is Duck Insider.
We need to get community. We need this thing to be bigger than just our little circle of players and coaches.
Are you kidding me? Touchdown, Oregon.
With 2 seconds on the clock. He hits it!
That's the bigger picture in this thing, allowing the community to celebrate the hard work, blue-collar mentality this group brings to the table.
And the Ducks have won it. The Ducks have won.
We get to struggle together, and we get to have joy together.
The Ducks are Pac-12 champions.
I am so proud right now to be the head coach at Oregon.
Oregon's a Fiesta Bowl champion in a 12-win season.
This is Duck Insider on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield, presented by OnPoint Community Credit Union. People are the point. Now let's go live to the Country Financial Studio to talk Oregon Duck Athletics.
Welcome back inside the Country Financial Studio. It's a brand new week of Oregon athletics here on Duck Insider, brought to you by OnPoint Community Credit Union. People are the point. I'm your host, Ryan Milano, breaking down what went on over the weekend, what's going to continue to go on for Oregon athletics throughout the week. And it was a little bit of a weird weekend and an odd weekend, only for the fact that, well, both teams were on the road, which is a little bit odd. Normally, during basketball season, they stagger the home and home and the road and road, so that the women are at home when the men are on the road and the men are at home when the women are on the road, and vice versa. It's been a little bit different over the past few weeks for Oregon basketball, both on the men's and women's side. That next week actually will change up as Oregon women and men flip-flop, so that they actually alternate being home and on the road. But we still have to wait a few more weeks for that, as both teams this coming weekend are going to be both at Matthew Knight Arena playing against some top-tier opponents. So getting prepared for that, but also breaking down the weekend that was for Oregon athletics, where the men went on the road to the mountain schools. The final time that the Oregon men are going to have to do that mountain school road trip, and it was a difficult one this time as well. As well, Colorado, we talked about it on Friday, always a tough place to play, but also Oregon going up against Utah, and the Ducks, they went down to the wire against the Utes, but couldn't get the victory this time around, as Oregon ended up dropping 80-77 the final against Utah in that one. Also, we're going to talk about the women as well. Chris Clayton, the broadcaster for Oregon women's basketball this year, will join the show. He'll talk here live in the Country Financial Studio as we break down Oregon women's basketball and their way through the Pac-12 at this point in the season, as they just faced off against the Bay Area schools of Stanford and Cal over this last weekend. All right, let's talk about Oregon men's basketball and the 80-77 loss to Utah and how it happened, because it was a tightly contested game that was going on at the same time as women's basketball. It was really a two-screen setup. It was going on at the same time as NFL playoffs as well. I had to make some concessions of what I was going to watch. It was Oregon men's basketball on the TV, Oregon women's basketball on the computer as we worked our way through. But it was a big athletics day on Sunday, especially for Oregon, as both teams started at noon, closed at about the exact same time. Both games came down to the stretch. I didn't know how to digest it, to be honest with you, because I was watching, and then I was trying to watch, and both games were going on at the same time, and I felt like I was going cross-eyed, with one eye looking forward and one eye looking down, and trying to figure out what was going on in the women's game at the same time as the men's game. If you were the same as me, and you were trying to break it all down, I went back and I went through both games, and I'll break down exactly how both happened for Oregon over the weekend. But let's start with the men in Salt Lake City against Utah, the 80-77 loss. How did it happen? Because it was another tightly contested game for Oregon. It seems like that's been every single game in Pac-12 play has been tightly contested, down to the stretch, down to the wire against some really good teams in Pac-12 play, and Utah was another one of them. They're second in the Pac-12 in net rankings. They're firmly in to the NCAA tournament, depending on who you look at for your latest bracketology, but really regardless of who you look at, they're pretty squarely in the field, and it would have been a quad one win for Oregon if they would have gone on the road and gotten the win over Utah, and a really quality win at that against a team that was inside of the top 25 in the net rankings. And early in this ball game, it was a shooting barrage for the Ducks. Oregon was able to knock down a whole bunch of jump shots from outside, but that was all Oregon was getting. In fact, the first 15 points all came off of three-pointers. There were 2 for Brennan Rigsby, 3 for Jermaine Couisnard, and all of a sudden it was Oregon who was tied with Utah at 15, but it was only 3-pointers. The Ducks started 5 of 6 from beyond the arc and were able to knock a lot of 3-pointers down to keep pace with a Utah team that was scoring at really every level. And I thought the ball movement as well was something that was really impactful for Oregon early to generate a lot of those open shots. You saw that extra pass for Oregon a lot, especially early in this ball game where they started to play on the perimeter. They hadn't quite gone to N'Faly Dante yet early in this ball game. He had a big game and especially a big second half. We'll get to that in a second. But Oregon wasn't going through N'Faly Dante to start. They were keeping it out on the perimeter. They were stretching out Utah's defense. And with a scrambling Utes defense, Oregon got a lot of open looks from the perimeter, and they knocked a lot of them down. But then after it was tied at 15, Oregon started to score at all 3 levels of the court, where Jermaine Couisnard drives in, he gets a layup, starts the 2-point scoring, and Oregon was able to knock down a few more 3-pointers. They were able to knock down a few more 2-pointers, and Oregon started really picking up that offensive potency early in the first half. And there were a lot of things that didn't necessarily go the Ducks' way in the first half, but the shooting was one of them, and one of the big reasons why Oregon had a 33-32 lead into the break. Actually, the Oregon shooting discrepancy, despite the fact that Oregon really rounded out their shooting totals towards the end of the first half, the Ducks shot 7 of 12 from deep in the first half and 6 of 17 from 2. That's a incredibly high percentage from beyond the arc, but not quite the percentage that you're looking for from inside of the arc, and despite that, Oregon still had the lead. Oregon also wasn't getting to the foul line. The fouls were actually pretty similar. Oregon fouled Utah 9 times, Utah fouled Oregon 6. So a little bit more fouls for Oregon going to Utah, but the free throw discrepancy, Oregon didn't attempt one in the first half. Utah went 7 of 10 from the line in the first half. So it was the Utes who were able to get some of those free baskets, and once again, despite that, Oregon still had a 1-point halftime advantage, really led by Jermaine Couisnard and his 13 points. I mentioned 3 of the 3-pointers that he knocked down early. He also got in 2 2-point buckets, 13 at the break for Jermaine Couisnard, and then by the time Oregon came out of that halftime break, well, it was a whole lot more of Jermaine Couisnard, and then the big fella. I felt like this was the best half for N'Faly Dante maybe all year, and if you remember the first game of the year, N'Faly Dante had one of the best games that I think we've ever seen from the big man. He had that good of a second half against Utah in this one, with him and Couisnard really bouncing off each other. N'Faly Dante entered the halftime break with 2 points. By the end of the game, he had 23. That's how good of a second half N'Faly Dante had. Also, Jermaine Couisnard, he doubled up his first half total. He had 13 points in the first half, 13 points in the second half, ended up with 26 total. Throughout the second half, Couisnard and Dante, 13 of 20 combined between the two of them. The rest of the team went just 3 of 16. That's not going to get it done. Dana Altman talked about that. We'll get to that in a second. And he was not necessarily super happy about the way that the rest of the team played outside of Couisnard and Dante. But Jermaine Couisnard and N'Faly Dante, they really carried the load, especially in that second half, where Oregon scored 44 points in the second half, really led by both Couisnard and Dante. In the second half, it was a game of mini runs where Oregon jumped out to a 5-point lead to start the half, and then right away, Utah answered with their own 9-0 run to go up 4 points. Then Oregon held the Utes scoreless for 3+ minutes of game time to flip the script, where the Ducks went back up by 4 points. So it was back and forth, and it continued to go back and forth because Utah then went on another 9-0 run, and they took a 5-point lead going all the way down inside of 2 minutes to play. So it was one of those games where it felt like whoever had the run last was going to win, and there was enough time left on the clock for Oregon to have that late run. And you thought they were going to. And for a second there, they did have the late run. It was all the way down to the stretch where after that 5-point lead by Utah, Oregon's able to cut it to 1 after a Couisnard 3. There were some other shots in there that shortened the deficit, but it was a 1-point game. Ducks down with just 80 seconds left to play. And then, well, everyone went cold. No one could make a shot, not for Oregon, not for Utah. And then it came down to the last possession. Oregon had it. Slight difference between shot and game clock. Ducks were going to have to put up a shot with a few seconds left in the ball game, but it was Jermaine Couisnard who had the ball in his hand. I mean, that's the guy you want to have the ball in his hand. He had such a tremendous game in this one where he was able to score pretty much at will from any spot on the floor, get the ball into Kuznard's hand. Number 5 drives down left side of the lane, tries to put up a wild flip layup, wouldn't go, but you've got N'Faly Dante in the middle. It's the biggest guy on the floor. He was able to clean it up, and it looked like he had the put-back lay-in, and it just rimmed out. It would have given Oregon a 1-point lead with 8 seconds left, and well, then after that, ball misses, Oregon has to foul. Then it gets into this wild foul game where it miss a free throw, Oregon does, gets the offensive rebound, then ducks down 2, and N'Faly Dante has a chance there at the line. If he makes both, it would be tied, but it's a big ask from a center who's just getting back into game action to settle himself down after what was a phenomenal game for N'Faly Dante and try to knock down those 2 free throws. He missed the first, made the second. Oregon ended up having to foul Utah. They made 2 free throws, and that's how we got to the 80-77 final score in the ball game. It was a wild game. It was a tremendous game, but one that Oregon came out on the opposite side of. The individual stat lines for Jermaine Kuznard and N'Faly Dante. Kuznard, 26 points in the ball game. Spread them out evenly, 13 in the first half, 13 in the second half. He made 7 threes, 70% from deep. Jermaine Kuznard was in this game 7 of 10 from beyond the arc. He had 4 rebounds, 4 assists, a block, and a steal all-around stat line for Jermaine Kuznard. And then N'Faly Dante, he was tremendous, especially in the second half. In the first half, he didn't necessarily jump off of the screen when I was watching the game, but he put together a pretty solid first-half stat line despite not being able to generate in the points column. He found the points column in the second half, finished with 23 points, 21 of them coming in the second. He had 10 rebounds, so a double-double for N'Faly Dante. How about this for your big man? 6 assists for the big fella, 1 turnover. Yeah, he was taking care of the basketball, and Dana Altman's about to talk about it, but he was even more active on the defensive side of things. 2 blocks, a steal. He was running in transition. The ball was flowing out of his hands. It felt like people were moving around him. It felt like this was N'Faly Dante's game where he really was the epicenter of the Oregon offense. Then he translated defense into offense by making a lot of runs for Oregon where the Ducks would come out, and they were very successful utilizing N'Faly Dante out of that fashion. And, well, it really did feel like N'Faly Dante for the first time played like N'Faly Dante back out of the injury. I know that Dana Altman was pretty happy with the way that the big man played. He was also pretty happy with Jermaine Kuznard, but still had a whole lot of things to clean up after the 80-77 loss for Oregon. Here is Joey Mack catching up with Coach Altman after the game.
Coach, not the outcome you wanted on a heck of a basketball game. A lot of back and forth. What were some of your takeaways here from this one?
Well, you can't give up 48 points in a half. We played really well defensively the first half, but had 8 turnovers. Second half, we don't turn it over, score 44 points, but we give up 48. And just really disappointed with, some of our focus. Now, 2 guys I'm not disappointed in, and it's not because of the points they scored, but N'Faly Dante had 10 rebounds, 11 deflections. He drew 9 fouls, 2 block shots, 6 assists, 1 turnover. Played an unbelievable game. He was so focused and so prepared. And Jermaine played really well. I really got after him in film against performance against Colorado. Now, he did hit some shots, but he was second in deflections and talking defensively, trying to get our guys, in the right position. So those 2 guys I'm not disappointed in. The rest of the guys, they got to play harder. We got to play harder. We can't give up 48 points. And we're playing a lot of guys, and they got to give maximum effort when they're out there. And we played hard, but we didn't play as smart, as we needed to. And, Dante, missed a putback there that guy thought he was going to hit, and then the free throw. But like I said, we'd have never been in position to do that without him. He played his tail off.
Yeah, I was talking about it on the broadcast, Coach. Like, some big plays, a lot of back and forth down the stretch, and you guys have won on a lot of these close games. This is one of the few chances that you haven't had to win those close ones.
No, it put them on the line too much. They beat us at the free throw line. We scored more buckets and actually hit more threes than they did, but beat us at the free throw line.
Touching on Dante, Coach, just to build on that, changes the team. There's no doubt about it if he can play like that, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. No, we're a lot better team with him on the floor, and our guys just got to do a much better job of flying around defensively around him. And I think if we get that, we'll be in a lot better shape.
What are your other takeaways heading into the week of practice from the trip, Coach?
Well, we just given up 85 times or 6 times. We're 1-5. I mean, not the smartest guy around, but we're 1-5 when we give up 80. And our defensive performance has got to improve. And offensively, all the analytics got us, 30s, top 30. And our defense isn't. It's way down there. And was another night it proved it.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time, and here's to some defense at home next week.
All righty, thanks.
I think Coach put a lot of good perspective on the game for Oregon and kind of the state of the Ducks where Oregon is now through not the middle, but in the thick of things in Pac-12 play. Still a whole lot of season left to play, but Oregon now is a good Pac-12 sample size. First, I want to touch on the standings for Oregon as the Ducks at the top of the table, 5-2, along with Arizona and Arizona State. Those are the next 2 opponents for the Ducks at Matthew Knight Arena. It's going to be Thursday at 6 o'clock against ASU and then Saturday at 2:30 against Arizona for the Ducks at Matthew Knight Arena. It's going to be a big game. If you're a fan, you should be there. I'm not sure what else is going on this weekend, but Thursday at 6, pencil in for Arizona State. Saturday at 2:30, pencil in for Arizona. I'll be there. I hope to see you there as well. But touching on some of the other things that Coach Altman said, talking about Dante and Kuznard as well. I mentioned the stat line for N'Faly Dante, and it's an incredibly well-rounded stat line. I mean, a double-double with 6 assists and a few blocks and a steal. Those are great numbers. But the 11 deflections and forcing 9 fouls, those are numbers that don't show up in the box score that the coaches look at. Obviously, you just heard Coach Altman talk about it. Those are the type of numbers that really make a well-rounded game. 11 deflections, that's just getting your hands in the passing lane. 9 fouls, that's just asserting yourself in the middle of the floor. Big game for N'Faly Dante. Actually, Kuznard and Dante combined for 49 of the Ducks' 77 points in the ball game. And despite it being a 2-man show for the second half, Oregon still scored 44 points in that second half. That's a high-volume number. Dan Altman talks about allowing fewer than 80 points. Well, 44 times 2, that's 88. It's a high, potent offense. The only problem for the Ducks is, well, they allowed Utah to score a little bit more than them in that second half as well. Also, turnover battle was a little bit wonky in the ball game. Oregon lost it in the first half. Ducks turned the ball over 8 times in the first half. Kept it together. 0 turnovers in the second half. That's something that you like if you're Coach Altman. He mentioned it briefly talking to Joey, but Utah turned the ball over 7 times in the first half, 7 times in the second half, 14 times total. And Oregon actually outscored Utah 15-5 in terms of points off turnovers. So despite the fact that Oregon gave up the ball a lot in the first half, Oregon made the halftime adjustment, took care of the basketball in the second half, and were able to turn that around and actually be positive against the Utes in the turnover battle. Problem defensively for Oregon in the second half was Utah just couldn't miss a shot. Shot 68% from the field in the second half. It's a tough way to win against a team that just shoots the ball lights out. An experienced Utah team that when they get going, they know how to ride that momentum. They certainly did at home for Utah on Sunday. And now all of Oregon's losses to this point in the season have been while allowing 80-plus points. In fact, Oregon has won every single game where they have not allowed 80-plus points in regulation, and they have lost every game where they have allowed 80-plus points in regulation. The Ducks are 1-5 in games where the opponent scores 80-plus, and well, the only game where Oregon won was in an 86-83 win over Michigan in overtime at Matthew Knight Arena, where, of course, the little bit of extra time added adds to the point total. So it's a whole lot of moving and shaking for Oregon in what was an incredibly tightly contested game against a very good Utah team. In fact, Oregon rose 5 spots in the net after the loss. The Ducks went into the game at 58 after the loss to Colorado earlier in the weekend, and the Ducks sitting right now are at 53 in the net rankings. So that metric moving up for Oregon, but you heard Dana Allman talk about it. The offense, it's about top 30, top 40 in the nation in about every single statistic you look at. The defense, that's where Oregon needs to improve, according to Coach Altman. And you look at that 80-point number, and that's really the number that you got to focus in on. Did Oregon play a good game defensively, or did the Ducks not play up to standard? And that 80-point threshold is right about where Coach Altman puts it at, and those are the statistics that he read off to Joey. So it was an 80-77 loss for the Ducks in Salt Lake City as Oregon lost to a really good Utah team, now trying to get back in sole possession of first place in the Pac-12 when they play against both Arizona State and Arizona this weekend. So still in charge of your own destiny way early in the Pac-12 season. But if Oregon continue to rattle off wins, they can stay at the top of the table. It was also a really difficult weekend for Oregon women's basketball, going up against two pretty good teams in the Pac-12, a very talented Stanford team and a Cal team that gave Oregon a test down in the Bay. We're talking about all that next. You are listening to Duck Insider on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Dear winter, Toyota can't get enough of you, because Toyota's got 22 vehicles with available all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, and that's more than any other auto brand. So you bring the action and we'll bring the traction. Always Toyota. Toyota, let's go places.
Based on manufacturer's websites as of 11/21/23.
As a local community credit union founded by teachers, OnPoint is committed to supporting the students and faculty at the University of Oregon. And on game day, we're right there with you, on the field, in the bleachers, and in the classrooms. Drop by our local branch today and discover the many ways OnPoint can help support your financial well-being. OnPoint Community Credit Union. People are the point. Federally insured by NCUA. Equal housing opportunity.
Dear winter, Toyota can't get enough of you, because Toyota's got 22 vehicles with available all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, and that's more than any other auto brand. So you bring the action and we'll bring the traction. Always Toyota. Toyota, let's go places.
Based on manufacturer's websites as of 11/21/23.
More Duck Insider coming up on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Sometimes I just cannot believe all the storms we've gone through here.
I can only hope that we'll be able to leave this house to you one day, baby. You're our legacy.
Planning for these disasters will make sure we're safe, and is the best way to protect that legacy.
Protect your legacy. Visit ready.gov/plan for the tools and tips you need to start your emergency preparedness plan today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back inside the Country Financial Studio. It's Duck Insider. I'm your host, Ryan Milano. Duck Insider brought to you by OnPoint Community Credit Union. We just talked about the Oregon game that tipped off at noon on Sunday. Well, what about the Oregon for the men? And well, what about the Oregon women's game that tipped off at noon on Sunday at the exact same time, forcing a little multitasking? They say you're not as productive when you're multitasking. I felt like I was so locked into both games, because normally when I'm watching a game, there's just other things going on. Sometimes I'll clean my house. Sometimes I'll go on my phone. Sometimes, you're just doing other things. Maybe you're making lunch, making dinner. You couldn't afford that if you were watching both games on Sunday. It was you're watching, and then when you're not watching, you're still watching. It didn't matter what screen you were looking at. You were always looking at a screen. I felt like that was some of my most productive athletics watching maybe all year. It was awkward. It definitely wasn't routine, but there were some positives that came out of both games going on at the same time. Let's talk about the Oregon women's basketball game against Cal on Sunday. The Ducks ended up dropping this one 66-57 against California on the road. It was a game that was a little bit different to the game that Oregon played against Stanford on Friday, where the Ducks actually jumped out to a big lead in this one. Oregon in the game on Friday, they spotted the Cardinal 20 points. Actually, after that first spurt on Friday, Oregon was able to keep pace with Stanford for a majority of the game. In this one, it was opposite. Oregon jumped out to a lead early, and it was not like the game against Stanford. Oregon had 18 points and were up by 6 at the end of the first quarter. Philly Shea put in a very solid first quarter, 6 points, 3 rebounds. Grace Van Slooten, only 3 points in the first, but 4 assists. Finding your teammates, Grace Van Slooten, she has been playing the point some to give relief to Chance Gray, just to make sure that Chance doesn't have to handle the ball the entirety of the time. And, well, Grace Van Slooten has been doing a pretty solid job in terms of facilitating, at 4 assists in that first quarter. But then in the second quarter, it's where Cal caught fire. Oregon sustained. In fact, for Cal, they had one player, Cremilli, for them, who was just a 3-point shooter. She shot 3-pointers and shot 3-pointers, and I looked away and she was still shooting 3-pointers. And I don't think Cal ever stopped shooting 3-pointers. In fact, Cremilli in just that second quarter alone scored 12 points on 4 of 7 from deep. So that's hard to contend when there's one singular player who is converting from outside at that efficient of a clip. But Oregon was able to sustain, and the Ducks were up 33-31 at halftime, and a game that was dominated by both teams in different facets of the game. Philly led the way for Oregon in the first half, 10 points, 7 rebounds for Philly. She was on her way to a double-double. She always is on her way to a double-double. She leads the Pac-12 in that statistic. But in terms of first half stats, Oregon dominated points in the paint. The Ducks outscored Cal 14-2 on points in the paint in the first half. But Cal made their rebounding presence known, out-rebounding Oregon on the offensive glass 13-1. That was a big problem for Oregon in the ballgame. Coach KG, he talked about in the postgame. We'll get to that in just a second. But then coming out of the break, Ducks up 2. It was a third quarter that was more back and forth, and Oregon maintained their advantage going into the fourth quarter. And it was the fourth quarter where Oregon just didn't have as many bullets left in the chamber as Cal was continuing to be efficient from outside, but it was the Cal defensive intensity that really ramped up in the second half, forced Oregon into a few mistakes, and that's where Oregon kind of lost a little bit of their offense in the fourth quarter. They only mustered 9 points and allowed 19, and, well, Oregon, they did a few things well in the second half, rebounded themselves from the first quarter, actually tied Cal in terms of offensive rebounds at 5 apiece. But it was the turnovers. Just 5 turnovers in the first half, but Oregon turned it over 15 times in the second half, resulting in 21 California points off of turnovers. The Ducks found their 3-point shot. That was a big question coming into the ball game, was can Oregon shoot it from deep? Oregon shot it the best they have all season from outside in this ballgame against Cal. 5 of 10 from beyond the arc, the best 3-point percentage for Oregon on the year in any single game. But Cal shot it 39 times from outside. I mean, my goodness. That's the most shot by a Cal team that shoots a lot of 3-pointers, and Oregon just couldn't quite sustain that 3-point barrage with giving up those turnovers in the second half. Final stat lines, Philly Shea, she had 17 points, 14 rebounds. It's her 12th double-double of the year. She leads the Pac-12 in double-doubles. Grace Van Slooten, pretty well-rounded stat line, 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists for Grace Van Slooten. And it was a tightly competitive game against a Cal team that Oregon is matching up against in the Pac-12 standings, but one that Oregon was not able to come out on top of. Chris Clayton met up with Kelly Graves after the game. Here's some thoughts from KG.
What do you think was the difference in this one? Well, turnovers, missed layups, failure to defend the three-point line, and then the biggest disappointment tonight was our effort on the boards. We just gave them way too many second chance points, and that was the ball game. But we lost some composure in the second half, made some kind of silly turnovers, and it's unfortunate. This one hurts. They won the other night. Listen, Stanford's just a better team than us right now, but this is the game that I thought we could have gotten, and it was their force to take. And we didn't finish well enough inside. I don't know how many points we gave up around the rim, that we just got to make. And, it's a disappointing performance.
Yeah, they had 24 second-chance points. It's tough to defend a team on the three-point line off offensive rebounds. How big do you think that was, those offensive boards for Cal?
Oh, it's huge. I don't know how many three-pointers they got off the offensive rebounds that they did get. And, it was kind of an effort thing, I think, tonight. It's just disappointing. These are the ones that really hurt. I mean, Cal's one of the teams we're competing with for, a seed that's not at the bottom. I mean, we just got to do better. And we let this one slip away. I think we'll be real disappointed, when we look back at this.
All right, Coach. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Safe travels.
A loss for Oregon that wish was a W. Those are how a lot of losses are, but in this game in particular, Oregon went into that Cal weekend thinking that they could beat Cal, and they were toe-to-toe with Cal and had the advantage through three quarters, but it couldn't quite sustain in the fourth. We're going to talk a whole lot more women's basketball, and, I could talk about women's basketball. Why would you want to hear from me? It's the man who's calling the games, Chris Clayton. He's joining us here in the Country Financial Studio coming up next. You're listening to Duck Insider on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Hey Duck fans, we're all about protecting our home turf here in Eugene. You should do the same for your home with Country Financial Insurance. Most home insurance doesn't account for inflation, but with Country Financial, yours can. If something happens to your home, make sure you can rebuild the same house in the same place. Call a local representative or 866-COUNTRY and get a solid defense for your home. Home insurance policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Casualty Insurance Company, or Country Preferred Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois. Property must meet age and condition requirements, which vary by state.
At Shadow Hills Country Club, we're more than just an award-winning golf course and practice facility. Our events team offers all-inclusive event pricing that allows us to take care of all the details while you enjoy your event. Our indoor and outdoor venues offer you a wide variety of fully staffed options that put the focus on you. From weddings to business and social events, at Shadow Hills Country Club Events Center, you get the benefits of a resort atmosphere and amenities in a peaceful country setting, just minutes from downtown Eugene. Call for a tour today or visit shadowhillsevents.com.
Don't go anywhere. Duck Insider continues after these messages on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
My simple solution to the problem was remove people from the scene and help them feel safer.
In response to attacks against Asian Americans, Maddie Park raised over $250,000 to donate cab rides to the Asian community.
There is so much more work to be done. We really need to come together and tackle this issue as a community.
Support the Asian community. Learn how at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
Welcome back inside the Country Financial Studio. Duck Insider brought to you by OnPoint Community Credit Union. I'm Ryan Milano, and Chris Clayton is here. Chris, welcome into the studio. It's not his first time. He's here for Tip-Off Tuesdays. We'll have one tomorrow. It just got done actually breaking the fourth wall, talking with KG. You're going to be talking to a player after the show. So it's a whole lot going on for you.
There is, yeah, and it's kind of a secret. We schedule these and record some of these interviews maybe at different times than you would expect.
Did I let the cat out of the bag? Was I not supposed to do that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think people really notice. But if you feel like, oh, he's wearing the same shirt 2 days in a row, that's why, because we're recording some Tip-Off Tuesday stuff today. So
great shirt, by the way.
Well, thank you.
I did not get the retro logo shirt, and I'm honestly a little jealous of the all-white Oregon retro logo.
I like this one. I like the retro. I think they're available in the Duck Store, or at least something similar. So I guess we can plug the Duck Store there. But yeah, I like the retro stuff. I like the modern ones, like the one you're wearing. I wear that one too. But I really like this retro logo here. So it's nice to see that there's been more and more of that type of old school stuff available lately, because I really enjoy this as well.
I always try to coordinate because men's basketball, everyone on the bench always wears like either this polo or the green one, and so I try to coordinate and to get the inside scoop of what color is being worn.
Yeah.
I'm wrong more times than I'm right, but I really do try. I attempt.
And when you're on the road trips, when you'll be with baseball, you'll also try to consider who you're playing at, right? So if Oregon's playing with that shirt like Iowa or somebody that's black and white, then you're like, well, I should probably wear the green one. So then that's when you really start to go deep into your roster of shirts to make sure you're not matching the other team.
Well,
so there's strategy to it.
Yeah, lucky this year, we don't have a whole lot of overlap with all the other colors in the Pac-12, so I feel like I'm pretty scotch-free. But I'll have to think about that for the road trips.
And then in the Big Ten, when Oregon's playing Iowa, which is going to be weird to have the conference games.
I'm glad this is an O on my chest because things can get really confusing.
That's right. I just keep thinking of Iowa just because that's who's black and yellow. But,
I mean,
it's college sports.
You got one. Speaking of road trips, you just went on one. You just got back from the Bay Area. I feel like fans don't necessarily get the inside look into sort of what goes on throughout a road trip and sort of the procedure that a team goes throughout a road trip. So just kind of take me through this weekend. When did you leave? What happened when were practices? Kind of going through the weekend. What happened for Oregon women's basketball as they went into the Bay and prepared to play Stanford and Cal over the weekend?
This was a nice road trip for everybody involved, for me and for the team, because the flight's short, right? Down to the Bay Area, it's just about an hour, 10-minute flight. So that makes it a lot more of an enjoyable travel experience. And I think sometimes I forget, or at least I especially used to forget, how close the Bay Area really is. I mean, when I went to school, I first got to college at the University of Oregon, I was like, why is everybody from the Bay Area? It's like all the other fellow freshmen in my dorm, they're like from the Bay Area. I'm like,
it's every single one.
It is.
It's crazy.
They're taking over. And then you start to realize that it's pretty close. I mean, it's about an hour flight if you want to drive. I know the KWVA student radio guys, they made the drive down there and called the game, so respect to them for making that drive. It's a long drive, there's no doubt, but you can make it in a day. They did it.
So. I've made that drive in a day a few times. We got back well after midnight both times. It was definitely a traverse, to say the least. But you can theoretically drive it, but I think you guys had a better setup flying.
Yeah, thankfully the Ducks, the team, didn't have to drive down there. So flew down there, and it's really a powerful environment to play at Stanford with all the history that they've created. And I think what was also special about the game Saturday is Oregon going into it, of course, they're focused on coming away with the win, trying to pull off the upset win at Stanford, but there was an extra magic about Maples Pavilion because it was Tara Vanderveer's win number 1202. She tied Coach K in that win over the Ducks. And there's, from both coaches, from Kelly Graves and from Tara Vanderveer, there's nothing but respect between those two. They have, and Kelly Graves has talked about this a lot, they've grown to become friends over the last few years. A lot of their views on college basketball and on the sport and how things are structured in terms of the rules, they align a lot. So that they're friends, and he's got nothing but respect for her, and what she's been able to accomplish has just been remarkable. So it was disappointing that Oregon couldn't pull off the upset at Stanford, who's a terrific team in battling to make a Final Four, win a championship this year. But the fans, I mean, the place was packed, and people were obviously excited about what Vanderveer was able to accomplish there. But then just about an hour bus ride up to Berkeley, so it's all in the same area, and Oregon played a game that honestly was disappointing. I think that's a game that you'll hear from Kelly Graves on Tip-Off Tuesday, and you played some of the post-game interview as well, and he was honest. He said it just hurt. I mean, that was a game the Ducks felt like they could have, or maybe even arguably should have won. I mean, you hold a team to 32% from the field, which they did against Cal, and that's usually enough to win. That's really good defense. The problem was the rebounding. I mean, Cal ended up producing so many more shot attempts than the Ducks because of those offensive rebounds. Then they started to force some turnovers in the fourth quarter as well, and the shot percentages really become just, they don't matter when you're taking that many more shots than your opponent. And Cal was getting so many shots off turnovers and offensive rebounds that irrelevant. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word irrelevant. Shot percentages become irrelevant is what I wanted to say. And so, Cal takes 39 threes, doesn't shoot a great percentage, and still win because of rebounding and turnovers. So it's a big issue for the Ducks and a big disappointment, but thankfully for them, they can come back home, get back in the routine, go to class, sleep in their own beds, and get back to work.
And it's a bit of an odd dichotomy where Oregon dominated so much offensively in the paint in that game, where you outscore Cal by such a significant margin in terms of paint points, but then it couldn't quite reel in those rebounds. You don't see that very often, especially in hoops.
And part of that is when you run a zone, which the zone has been at times so effective for Oregon this year. But if you run a zone, it can be susceptible to rebound. So it's kind of a give and take that in a zone you could force it, misses and contest every shot, but sometimes you don't rebound quite as well. But on the same token, Oregon's had games where in the zone they've been dominant rebounding the ball against Arizona State and Arizona, who they're not Stanford, right? But those are still good, pretty good Pac-12 teams, especially Arizona, and Oregon out-rebounded them by 20. So they've had games this year where they've been able to rebound, and that's, I think, partly why Kelly Graves is so disappointed by it, is that his team has had moments this year of being a dominant rebounding squad with the size they do have inside. It just wasn't their night. It wasn't bouncing their way, and Cal is quick. They are not a huge team, but they've got a lot of quickness. I think they were able to lean on that to get to loose balls, but that's been for Oregon, trying to find that consistency in every facet, rebounding, scoring, limiting turnovers. It's been a bit of a roller coaster more than Kelly Graves would like.
And in a game against Cal, where I think the storyline kind of coming out of it was how many three-pointers Cal shot. Oh my goodness, their three-point barrage. But Oregon actually shot the three ball better than they have all year. They were 5 of 10 from deep, and I feel like every time Kelly Graves gets in front of the media, it's okay, well, what's going on with the three-point percentage? How are you going to get that up? Well, Oregon shot their best from deep in this game against Cal. How did it happen, and how much of a positive is that for Oregon if they can continue to knock those shots down at a high clip moving forward?
Well, yeah, and it's now the last 3 games, they're 40-plus percentage. Chance Gray, the last 8 games now, is shooting about 50% from 3. So part of that is Chance Gray shooting better because she takes a lot of the shots. Sophia Bell had a good game from 3 as well. The last, actually, a good weekend overall shooting the ball. But I think to your point with how's Oregon shooting better, it's a lot about the ball movement. Philly Che is doing a nice job through double and triple teams. I think for Che, it's getting used to drawing so much attention. As in her junior season now, she's been a force offensively. And I think when you become a go-to scorer, which Che has become for Oregon, she's had to learn how to deal with triple teams, which is something that she didn't have to necessarily deal with that often in her career. And she's gotten a lot better at that. So she's finding shooters on the outside. Grace Van Sluten has been stuffing the stat sheet this year with assists, and she's passing better. So with that, when they attract defense and cut into the paint, they're able to find shooters outside. So you see Sophia Bell and Chance Gray getting really good looks. And that's something Oregon can lean on, and part of what makes the Cal loss disappointing is how well they were able to shoot the ball. But it's certainly something Oregon can lean on now, is they're finding those open looks from downtown. And if their offense can consistently be that balanced with Che and Van Sluten inside and the three-pointers outside, this team is a different squad offensively.
I think you bring up a great point, and I want to stop you there because I want to continue to dive into it in the ball movement of this Oregon team, tic-tac-toeing it all the way around. But we do have to take one more break. Chris is going to stay for another segment, and, well, when we get out, we're coming back, and we're going to continue to talk to Chris Clayton. It's Duck Insider on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Dear winter, Toyota can't get enough of you because Toyota's got 22 vehicles with available all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, and that's more than any other auto brand. So you bring the action and we'll bring the traction. Always Toyota. Toyota, let's go places.
Based on manufacturer's websites as of 11/21/23.
As a local community credit union founded by teachers, OnPoint is committed to supporting the students and faculty at the University of Oregon. And on game day, we're right there with you, on the field, in the bleachers, and in the classrooms. Drop by our local branch today and discover the many ways OnPoint can help support your financial well-being. OnPoint Community Credit Union. People are the point. Federally insured by NCUA. Equal housing opportunity.
Dear winter, Toyota can't get enough of you because Toyota's got 22 vehicles with available all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, and that's more than any other auto brand. So you bring the action and we'll bring the traction. Always Toyota. Toyota, let's go places.
Based on manufacturer's websites as of 11/21/23.
Duck Insider continues after this timeout on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Put your phone on D&D. That means that do not disturb when you're driving. And when you're going from point A to B. I need you to stay safe, please, so always sing with me. So put your phone on D&D. That means do not disturb when you're driving. And when you're going from point A to B, I need you to stay safe, please, so always remember this beat.
Don't drive distracted. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Hey, son. How are you feeling?
I'm fine, Pops.
What's on your mind?
I can't explain it. Navigating without a compass, eyes waiting, started to wonder. Metamorphosis, loss of who you thought you was.
When your kid can't find the language, help them find the lyrics. Listen to the Sound It Out album and get tips and tools to start a conversation at sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by Ad Council and Pivotal Ventures.
Welcome back to Duck Insider here in the Country Financial Studio. Ryan Milano here with Chris Clayton as we continue to break down the Oregon women's basketball season. We just talked about this weekend for Oregon and how the Ducks are trending upwards in terms of their ball movement. Something that I think is really interesting for Oregon that they started to implement is Grace Van Slooten sort of spelling Chance Gray as the point guard at some times. She's come on as much more of a ball handler as of late, and you've seen the assist numbers kind of go up in correlation to her running the points some more. I think that's interesting.
It is, and it's also, and I'm not trying to say you're wrong, but it's also out of necessity because Kennedy Williams down with an injury lately, so she's missed the last few games. Hopefully she can be back as soon as possible. And so I think if you ask Kelly Graves, he wouldn't want Van Slooten having to do what she's been having to do at times, which is help try and beat a full court press off the dribble. And that's just been something that's necessary. And it's kind of a microcosm of how Oregon's season's gone with the heartbreak of Peyton Scott going out the opening 5 minutes of the season. So then you're down a point guard. So then you move Chance Gray to try and play point guard, even though her background is playing off guard. So you still have Kennedy Williams as a point, and she's been shaken up lately. So then you're down to kind of bare bones in the backcourt in terms of the primary ball handler. So he's turned to Grace Van Slooten, and it's just a testament to her talent as a player. To be able to lean on her to handle the basketball has been amazing. And she's had some assists with that area of the game where she's dribbled over the timeline and kind of initiated the offense, but also a lot of her assists have come within the flow of the offense, where she gets the ball at the high post and is able to find open players. I think she had a terrific pass against Cal where she drove in, actually left her feet and dropped it off to the left side to Basham for a layup. That was beautiful. That's an evolution of a point guard.
I was just about to talk about the same one. Yeah, she got the ball kind of in that post area around the baseline on the extra pass, drove in and handed it for a wide open layup. Yeah. That's some of that vision from Grace Van Slooten. And when you think about the big three of this team with Chance Gray, Grace Van Slooten, Philippina Shea, I feel like they complement each other so well because they can all do so many different things. Where Philly is sort of that prototypical post who will score on the interior and will eat up the rebounds. And Chance is someone who's a little bit of that combo guard, but a little bit more of the two where she's shooting. But Grace Van Slooten is someone who kind of fills in both areas where she can help score and facilitate from the perimeter with Chance Gray, but she can also help rebound and bruise it inside with Philly Shea. I think that Grace Van Slooten sort of in the big three serves as a little bit of a glue player to connect Chance Gray and Philly Shea and the rest of the offense.
It really is perfect. I mean, it's that triangle setup where you've got, especially the way Gray is shooting lately, the three-point shooter off the catch or off the dribble. Gray can make threes. Van Slooten can work back to the basket, or she can slash inside off the dribble. She can score in multiple ways. And then with Philly Shea, opponents have to constantly game plan for her because with her, not just her size, but her talent level inside, I mean, these opponents are throwing their best center, who usually ranges from 6'3" to 6'4", which usually is big enough.
And the Pac-12 is some of the best. Is the best conference for centers right now.
And Philly Shea is still able to produce mismatches, which is scary, and that's why Oregon is able to start their offense inside out. It's nice to be able to hit threes, but that's part of why you see Oregon start the game trying to go to Shea, because if Shea can get a few buckets inside, and the other coach maybe says, all right, we got to double team, and then they start double teaming Shea, that's when you start to get openings from the outside. And from Sophia Bell, too. She's a player that's been, a little bit inconsistent from three, is what Kelly Graves said. That he said that, she wanted to shoot a higher percentage so far this season, but she had a great weekend shooting the basketball, and when she's getting open looks, she's dangerous too. So the pieces are there to find that consistent offense. It's just this young Oregon team, it's been a process trying to learn how to do it together consistently.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Sophia Bell because of that inside-out play. She was 5 of 7 from deep over the weekend, so she knocked them down. She was able to convert, and we saw it last week with a Sammy Wagner who was able to make some jump shots down the stretch. It feels like for Oregon, outside of that big three, it's finding those complementary pieces that are going to make shots at that efficient clip, and Oregon has found that, especially in spurts, whether it be from a Sarah Rambis or one of the Williamses or the two we just talked about. It feels like Oregon's getting some of that supplementary help to the big three right now.
Yeah, and the Pac-12 is so good this year that with the big three we talked about with Van Sluten, Gray, and Che, there's no secret that those are the three Ducks players, the big three, if you will, that stirs the drink and get things going. So with these elite teams Oregon's playing game to game, they're game plan for it. They're ready for it. So that's forcing others to have to take shots and make plays. And at times we've seen they have. Sophia Bell's stepping up and able to knock down shots. Sammy Wagner was too. And really from start to finish this season, Kelly Graves has talked about the importance of developing that depth and having more and more players step up in the rotation. And that's something that we're not even halfway through Pac-12 play. I think that's something Oregon still wants to develop, is that consistent depth. It's one thing to have a role player have 6 points there, 8 points there, but they want that every game to be able to rely on the bench. And that's something that Oregon is growing in. As long as they have those role players stepping up, they'll be dangerous to beat anybody in the conference.
You talk about consistency. Oregon has been consistent, winning at home, 8-1 at Matthew Knight Arena. They've got a tough stretch coming up against two teams this weekend. Quickly, what is the key for Oregon to continue to win at Matthew Knight Arena?
I think a lot of it's going to come down to rebounding. I think with Utah, with that game, Alyssa Peely is an incredible player. I mean, she's set to be a first round, one of the top WNBA draft picks, an incredible scorer. And Oregon's already played some superstars this year and handled it pretty well, including Juju Watkins and Cameron Brink. So that's going to be step one for Utah, is just containing Peely if the Ducks can. But you got to limit your opponent from second shots. I think Oregon's proven they can have their opponent shoot pretty inefficiently. They can get hands up and get in passing lanes and make life tough. But defensive rebounds will be key, as it always is for Oregon. They've got the size, they've got the athleticism. They just got to find a way to do that over the course of the game and hold your opponent. It's a kind of a cliche in basketball, right? Hold your opponent to one shot. It's easier said than done, but if Oregon can do that with how well they've played at Matthew Knight Arena this year, I really believe they can be competitive in these games, and they should be close. There'll be great challenges. I mean, Utah is fresh off a huge win over USC. They beat USC by 20. Who was top 10, so Utah's up to 16th. And Colorado is looking like a national championship team this year. They're number 3 in the nation. So there's plenty of reason to come out to MKA to watch these games, because if Oregon can win one of these games, doesn't need to be both, they can win one of these games, it's the type of win that can build some massive momentum and turn the season around.
That's Chris Clayton, broadcaster for Oregon women's basketball. He's got a busy week ahead. Tip-off Tuesday tomorrow. He's talking with Sophia Bell and KG on the show. And then 2 top 25 matchups, Utah and Colorado, coming up this weekend. Chris, thanks for hanging out.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
That's Chris Clayton. I'm Ron Milano. We're taking one more time out, and then we're back on Duck Insider next on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
As a local community credit union founded by teachers, OnPoint is committed to supporting the students and faculty at the University of Oregon. And on game day, we're right there with you, on the field, in the bleachers, and in the classrooms. Drop by our local branch today and discover the many ways OnPoint can help support your financial well-being. OnPoint Community Credit Union. People are the point. Federally insured by NCUA. Equal housing opportunity.
Hey Duck fans, we're all about protecting our home turf here in Eugene. You should do the same for your home with Country Financial Insurance. Most home insurance doesn't account for inflation, but with Country Financial, yours can. If something happens to your home, make sure you can rebuild the same house in the same place. Call a local representative or 866-COUNTRY and get a solid defense for your home. Home insurance policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Casualty Insurance Company, or Country Preferred Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois. Property must meet age and condition requirements, which vary by state.
More Duck Insider coming up on the Oregon Sports Network from Learfield.
Adoption of teens from foster care is a topic not enough people know about, and we're here to change that. I'm April Dinwiddie, host of the new podcast, Navigating Adoption, presented by Adopt US Kids. Each episode brings you compelling real-life adoption stories told by the families that live them with commentary from experts. Visit adoptuskids.org/podcast or subscribe to Navigating Adoption, presented by Adopt US Kids. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families and the Ad Council.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
We're back in the Country Financial Studio on Duck Insider, brought to you by OnPoint Community Credit Union, and it's time for your Cafe Yum 2-minute drill, serving fresh food fast with organic ingredients. Enjoy famous Yum Bowl at 23 Cafe Yum restaurants throughout the Northwest, home of the Ducks. How about the weekend for Oregon tennis? An undefeated start for the men and the women. A 7-0 win for women's tennis to kick off the opener against Portland State, winning all 6 of the singles and dominating the doubles. And then it was men's tennis against Purdue. This was a game that Neil Schielander talked about or rather a match that Schielander talked about as being a very competitive one where Oregon was going to have to bring their A game. They did. Got a 4-3 win, split the singles, but took the doubles point to beat Purdue. And then on Sunday, it was a doubleheader for the men's side of things on the tennis court, and it was a 4-0 win versus Pacific and a 7-0 win over Seattle. So a 3-0 start for men's tennis to start the year and a 1-0 start for women's tennis to start the year, both going to be back in action next weekend as they continue to move forward throughout their seasons. And how about a pro Duck on the running side of things? Cooper Tier putting in a U.S. title performance in the 10,000 meter for cross country in Virginia. He put in a 29:06 time, which is very fast, faster than just about everyone in the country, actually, and that's what gets you to a U.S. title. Both basketball teams, men's and women's, couldn't get the wins over the weekend. Going to be back at MKA this week to turn things around against some tough opponents. That's it for the 2-minute drill. Go Ducks!
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. He sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself.
For many